Hello. Today we'll be talking about Enjoy the Plateaus, celeb cultures as a denial of death, a bunch of people clapping as they surround you, people who've artificially made you into someone else. Images are means to an end. We are no longer and we're not yet. This is an idea from Heidegger. Nothing, we are nothing, that aims to be a solid. This is an idea from Sartre. A good ship owner is a man of his word, a man who has some money lying around and is a little bit crazy. We're going to be talking about focusing on the simplest aspect of work and how Virgil Abloh made his shirt in 30 minutes. Specifically, the topics I want to visit that I kind of divined from looking at these ideas from the books is practice being revisiting an image. We are all states at once, so you may as well not get in your own way. And the world fills your mind with ideals to choose from, which leads to the taking advantage of individuals. So I want to start by talking about practice, because this is something that's been important to me lately in terms of thinking about how does one establish a practice and know that it's working. As we just said a second ago, the enjoy the plateaus idea is this kind of notion that practice isn't really a straight linear vertical line. As we know, when you're picking up a new skill, there might be a steep initial curve up of learning, and then a kind of taper off, and then for a while you might not be having any what feels like growth at all. And those plateaus can be extremely frustrating. But as I wrote, practice is actually revisiting an image. And I think this is kind of interesting because, I'm learning Japanese right now, and it's pretty fascinating to watch the brain kind of see something that it knows that it has some kind of pattern recognition for, but doesn't have a direct answer to, because it's still fuzzy. Spaced repetition hasn't locked it into the neural pathways that have turned it into long-term memory yet. So I think that this revisiting an image is kind of important. If you're doing a physical practice, or if you're doing, again, a language learning practice or a reading practice, you're revisiting something that's familiar. You know that you're going to be setting yourself up and putting yourself in the shoes of somebody who is going to be looking at something similar. And I think sometimes that similarity can feel off-putting. It can feel not enjoyable compared to what we would want, which is this kind of feeling of a steady pace towards mastery. And I think that this is interesting when we consider the images are a means to an end. So the way that this was posed in the book that I was reading, where images are a means to an end, which was the illusion of literacy and the triumph of the spectacle, is that images are weaponized by external forces to an individual to turn an individual into a particular version of themselves that's more amenable to that group or society. It's kind of a version of brainwashing, and I think that in a way, when we're doing practice, we're conducing a form of brainwashing of ourselves, where we're imagining an ideal version of ourselves that's past the learned state of the thing that we're interested in learning. So we force ourselves to get our bodies to repeat the motion of the piano, or repeat the words as they feel awkward in your mouth, trying to shape sumimasen or yoroshiku onegaishimasu, and kind of changing your accent and tonality and focusing on suki, ski, or focusing on an R, like dam and ram and lam, and that's it, the third one. You see, that's an example of practice. I had an image in my head of the word that I was trying to say, and then I failed at it twice as I kind of got there the third time. So this leads into the second point, which is that we are all states at once, so you may as well not get in your own way. I think the things that stuck out to me here from the books are we are no longer and we are not yet from Heidegger. We are a nothing that aims to be a solid by Sartre. and Virgil Abloh making a shirt in 30 minutes. I'll start with Virgil Abloh and then get to the philosophers. So with Virgil Abloh, again, a lot of people it's a very human concept to kind of be more held up in the plan, be more held up in the idea space than the actual doing of the thing. And sometimes that process can feel at the moment gratifying because it does feel like you're doing something. It feels like you're telling people what you want to be doing, but you're not actually doing the hard work of the thing. And we all know it when you see it. It's, you know that the discomfiture that comes through a practice. But specifically, when I wrote that we're all states, what I mean by that is that if we take Heidegger's state or point seriously, that we are no longer and not yet, Heidegger is basically making the point in Being and Time that we are creatures in time. We might index ourselves on the present because the present moment is the moment that's being lived, but we are all of the actions that we've taken in the past and all of the actions that we're going to do in the future. And we're no more any of those actions than we are current actions. So I think that in a way is a form of mental freedom. It gives you the ability to say, hey, I actually do want to pursue this state of being more so than this other state of being, because it will allow me to feel motivated about myself, and it will allow me to learn something about myself. And that is kind of a reward unto itself. I think that, with Sartre saying that we're nothing that aims to be a solid, this is a very kind of interesting statement of humans being this kind of liquid creature where when we're born, we're kind of the world is projecting images at us, and we are kind of reflecting those images back to the world. We're making the noises that we hear as babies. We're emulating our parents or imitating. And then after a while, we start to get our own identities. We start to develop our own mannerisms. And as we do this, we create our own cultures. We create our own ideas. I'm reading Malcolm X, A Life by Manning Marable, and I'm at a point in the book where Malcolm is starting to diverge from Elijah Muhammad, specifically his teachings in the NOI, because it's starting to not square with what Malcolm thinks needs to be done in terms of civil unrest and kind of group joint action in terms of making the image of black freedom that he has in mind. And I think that image is really interesting because, again, Elijah Muhammad actually teamed up with the Klan and the American Nazis at different points in the NOI history to create the Black separatist movement. A lot of these people were actually on board in the Klan and the American Nazi movement. And I'm tangenting here, but I promise it's related, is that again, these are images that are kind of built from this external. So it's like when you see all of these states of this person that you could be, the person that you are, and the person that you were, we often get in our own way because we get invested in a particular state of being. We get invested in our, for Malcolm's case, his continued relationship to the NOI and how the NOI helped him get through prison, or for the case of, a creative person who's trying to get started, they might get in their own way by not actually being able to do the work because they're afraid of the work. They've already latched themselves to a particular image. But all of the states kind of exist, and time can be weird. And I think through relativity and a bunch of those other kind of concepts, there's a Magpiean kind of tangent that we could jump off here of kind of like what does relativity have to do with life, and then there's eternal recurrence and everything like that here. But I think for our purposes, specifically for talking about practice, specifically for talking about not getting in your own way, specifically for talking about Virgil Abloh making a shirt in 30 minutes, is just start. And the great thing to start on, perhaps, is focusing on the simplest aspect of the thing that you're working with. Poetry or an essay, that's a word as the simplest kind of atomic unit. You could say characters, but I don't think characters have enough meaning to be considered an atomic unit. For code, it would be command structures. So if-else statements, for loops, method declarations, function declarations, variable initializations. Those things are kind of the things that create the simplest aspect. And if you can latch into the simplest aspects for 30 minutes for something like this video, it's creating this script. It's creating the simplest thing that can become the next thing. And I think that that's really important because, again, images are a means to an end. So if we give ourselves healthy images to practice against and to live against, we're more likely to achieve the goals that we set out for ourselves. Now, finally, I want to jump into this third point here about the world will fill your mind with ideals by taking advantage of individuals. And I want to preface this by saying I'm not trying to like be a cynic in the sense of the kind of notion of I'm really kind of actually upset with a lot of the kind of commentary of our era. I think we live in a very commentary-driven era. We live in a very critique-driven era. It's easier to critique something that exists and not be cringe than to kind of embrace a new idea and say something. And that has led, I think, to a number of externalities, which include the kind of proliferation of a few successful images that really latch into people's minds. I think in Hollywood, that would be kind of like the kind of Hollywood celebrity look. In tech, it's the startup VC culture, create a Silicon Valley company and become a billionaire. Other fields have it too. I think in again, going back to the Malcolm X example, in the NOI, it was being a very certain type of Muslim in the NOI's kind of idea of what it would mean to be a good church-going citizen, in their version of what they wanted, for the members who were subscribed to the NOI. For a ship owner, for example, in The Shipping Man, it would be the kind of, you have to be a little bit crazy. You have to be a man of your word and have a little extra money lying around that you're not afraid to maybe put into non-taxable accounts. And I think that kind of, again, image, that character that the world puts on you, it really depends on how embedded it is into that particular group and also the out-group understanding of it. And I think that in a way that serves to be a type of brainwashing, which again, I'm not saying is always a bad thing. I think that there are a lot of morals that are taught to people through these means of kind of reaffirming and kind of confirming things that make a person a good and healthy individual contributor to a society. But I think that it's a lot of the times people will do unnatural things to support the existence of these ideas. They will do unnatural thing to kind of fulfill this, celebrity culture being a denial of death, for example, right? This idea of I can just stay young forever if I inject my skin with certain chemicals that will kind of tighten me up and make me look younger. And even though I am heading towards the grave, I can pretend that I'm not. This clapping as they surround her, this was a very kind of a horrific quote from the Triumph of Spectacle, Illusion of Literacy book, where it's kind of like this idea of this woman who had a bunch of stretch marks, and she felt that her husband didn't love her and that she was ugly. So she went on this kind of, MTV kind of show where basically a bunch of these people did work on her and they gave her a glow up. And she looked in the mirror and she's like, oh my God, my husband can love me now. And the people who helped made her that, like kind of the author puts, they kind of collapsed upon her, clapping as she fell to the ground, crying with tears in her eyes because she looked younger and again felt deserving of love and beauty. And that's a good example of, again, that kind of unnatural effort to kind of achieve some kind of image of a goal that doesn't really align with maybe what would be a healthy thing to do. So I think that kind of wraps up what we talked about. Did we talk about basically everything here? Yeah, a good ship owner. I guess I'll just talk about the good ship owner just for a second here. The Shipping Man book is kind of going in a direction where it's both affirming the kind of ridiculousness of the financial industry, but also kind of lauding it and kind of parading it around as if people who own ships and people who kind of make big money trades are somewhat better than people who aren't involved in these kind of like harebrained schemes. And, I think that the the kind of interest of the fact that these ships are genuinely useful because they are getting global goods to people who wouldn't have access to them. I went to the grocery store earlier today and bought foods that shouldn't be available to me in my local area, but they are because of the way that global shipping works. And I think that, again, like I said, these images can be useful, but they tend to run away with it themselves. Sometimes they become way too big for their own good. And because they don't have a death signal, because they don't have a greater system that's kind of forcing it into a thing where it's saying, hey, you are no longer useful, similar to what we were just saying about kind of like the way you might practice, for example, you're fulfilling a bad image. And that's maybe the entire conclusion of this particular video, is that images are useful, states are useful, but they can also be harmful. And being able to tell the difference between the two might save your life. Yeah. Thank you for watching. If you like what you heard here of being able to kind of join multiple ideas of books together into a kind of semi-coherent narrative, then sign up for my one-on-one personal training. I'm helping people learn to use systems to become more well-read, specifically how to do parallel reading, how to let go of books, how to choose better books and ask better questions. So if that interests you, fill out the form in the link below, and have a good one.